I'll say that we're talking to David Noble today, and he's someone who I happened to encounter earlier in 2018. David, you wrote actually a very interesting comment on one of my videos, and I got back to you. It was
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I contacted you. You said you had your own story. I think it might have been, I think you might have commented on Gary's story, right? Was it the missile security guard? And you said that you had your own story to tell, and I contacted you, and you had shared a lot of very interesting information with me, information I really have thought about almost every day since we talked back last January. And I wanted to give you a chance to share your story with our YouTube listeners today. So we're talking with David Noble, and go ahead, David.
All right. Well, thank you. The following UFO and paranormal account story is based on true events that occurred and is intended to provide research assistance, I think, for those who are interested in the topic and subject I will cover. And it does not imply any opinion concerning the following subject matter on part of the U.S. Navy or individuals mentioned in part or in whole, and what I will provide today. Listeners should keep in mind that following is my version. Okay, what happened? How I looked at it when I was 18 years old. I'm now 75 years old, and this took place between 1961 and 1962, and that's 58 years ago. And so all kinds of people have surfaced coming out of coming out with stories and experiences. I was also stationed on the USS Nimitz, and they have been involved with UFO sightings. And my tour on the Nimitz was my last ship. The Nimitz was my last ship, and I've got a lot of UFO and paranormal experiences on there that have never been discussed, and maybe for another day. But, right now, I'd like to focus on my story. I realize it's not recent, but it's hardcore paranormal and UFO and USO experiences.
Yeah.
Not only did I experience, but other sailors on other ships that were part of Operation Dominic have also come forward to me, and in short blips over the last few years have testified that after I left in 1962 and got reassigned to my next command, the picket ships that were on station after the testing was completed, they continued to get bogies or UFOs that we call them now. They were called bogies back then. Long after I was transferred off the USS Finch. So,
just want to say one thing, David. We have heard a lot about the USS Nimitz recently. I'm sure that you have heard about that too. Since the
I got a clip. I think it was off your website. It was excellent. It was a combination of CGI and the experience. I wish we had the CGI and the story composers back then when I was aboard the Finch, because there was quite a few UFOs photographs taken by Air Force pilots that were monitoring the test site from a distance off Johnson Island, which was one of the focal points. Just as a footnote here, if anyone is interested in researching the limited information, but very good information about the USS Finch DER 328, the ship that I served on when these UFO sightings that I witnessed occurred, they can go to PDF file USS Finch and pull up that folder, and it's an awesome biography about that particular vessel I served on. I'm very proud to have served on it. It was for a short term, but it was a lifelong lifelong journey for me. So
Yeah.
I just say, I just want to say that it's very controversial, and I'm sure I'm going to get some hits from people that may still be alive if they haven't died from the radiation fallout that we all were exposed to, because many of them were not assigned to witness this when the ships announced that they were looking. They weren't looking. They ordered a few of us on the starboard side of the event aboard the Finch when it occurred. Most of the personnel were battened down below decks. The only ones on the bridge, the captain, the XO, and everybody else was on the bridge. But we were the only sailors on the starboard side. There must have been about a dozen of us, and I'll get to the details of that as we move right along. But
sure.
the disclosure here is very, very important, because the content of this subject is solely based on my personal observation and opinion, and it doesn't reflect the opinion of other witnesses of said subject, of the UFO, USOs. I was a watch member, doing my duty from midnight to 4 in the morning when we saw most of the UFOs, visual sightings, until I got on the job training as a radar tech, which didn't last very long. So I was able to go into to CIC, the Communication Intel Center aboard the Finch, and actually see and plot the UFOs that were spotted on the 10 radar. We had a 10 radar, 28 radars called by designation, and some other high classified radar systems at the time, which I personally suspected has something to do with the EMF takedown of or contacts with some of those UFOs spotted miles away on the horizon. But I'll get to that later. But right now, I just want to say that on or about the dates represented, these dates are available in the famous UFO Blue Book on the UFOs, the nuclear testing, the names of the ships that witnessed the UFO sightings. I, by chance, went online and did some research. And everything I'm telling you right here, research can go online. It can get, government documents if they want to take the time. It's taken me 10 years to get some of the information I have, not just from my memory, but from probing. They said after 20 years, I had to sign a disclosure that I would go to prison if I revealed what I'm going to reveal today, in part, because I think this is just the beginning of from the audio to a visual is what I want to.
So David, you said that some of what you're about to tell us was revealed in Project Blue Book in official documents, at least the sightings were?
Yeah, the sightings were, and I'll give you some percentages of what types of vessels reported sightings of UFOs and bogies, and which ones were considered satellites, but we didn't have a lot of satellites back then. I think we had 33 at the time. I have to look at my records. But there was a lot of disclaimers, and they were trying to move away from the point the military was interested in creating a whole new way of spying on our competitors like Russia, because the U-2 didn't do a very good job. So this was all going on at the same. There was so many things going on, the international crisis, and I was part of the Cuban crisis down there. I mean, for a guy that was between 18 and 20 years old, I've seen maybe not boots on the ground, but I've seen a lot of action. So anyway, I just want to go ahead.
I just wanted to say, you said that what you're about to disclose to us, you did sign a non-disclosure agreement, and you're going to be breaking that to share this information today?
Well, 20 years from the time I retired in 1980, I think it's beyond that.
Right.
So I don't think I'm going to. I don't think they're going to take. Yeah, I don't think they want to lock me up now because I already got one foot in the grave. You know what I mean?
No, I get it. But just before you begin, you did sign an NDA that has expired by now.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
The contributions on this UFO USO about story I'm about to reveal here is I'm strictly volunteered. I'm strictly volunteering it, and I'm putting it out there, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hits, but I'll just say, all you buffs out there, do your fact checking, do your own research, and maybe you'll find some information that slipped right by me, and I'm sure there's tons of it, because I'm the only one coming out, as far as I know. And the ones I've talked to, they said they don't want to get involved, they don't want to deal with it. They had short and long-term, witnessing, and at one time, and I don't know what happened to it. I don't want to sound like I'm just putting this out there because it's not true. I had a personnel listing of all the individuals who actually seen UFOs on the different radar picket ships out there, because there was a lot of picket ships out there. We weren't the only ones in Operation Dominic. So I just want to move along.
Yeah. Before we get, what's a picket ship?
A picket ship is our particular. The Finch was converted from a DE escort destroyer that would, they would be kind of like the part of a flotilla of warships protecting carriers and fuelers and, support ships that would support other ships like cruisers and other combative warships en route to their destination. And they would be in front, or they'd be off, many nautical miles away, searching for subs, or they'd be searching for aircraft or surface ships, and report back to the main command. So the picket ships was a new thing. But after the war, World War II and the Korean War and everything, a lot of these DEs, escort destroyers, were converted to radar pickets because we were in the Cold War, and we wanted to make sure the Russians weren't getting a jump on us, and we would be part of a contingent out in the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean. Above the equator, doing our thing to protect the coast.
Got it.
So that's what the picket ships were doing.
Got it.
Now.
Yeah, please proceed.
Yeah. So anyway, now some of the names have been deleted and changed, to protect the privacy of people. And one of the most important privacy of individuals is the chief master diver down in Gitmo. But any smart person, I'm not saying there's a lot of dumb ufologists out there, but any smart ufologist that has patience and has nothing better to do but to find the facts, they could walk, step back and what I'm telling you, and they could find out who this chief is. It's not. I don't know if they want to reveal it, and I don't know if they're dumb enough to want to invade the privacy of those individuals who might be family members. I think that's a dumb thing to do. But I went away from what I was told directly and personally from the chief himself, what he experienced, and I hold that sacred, and I hold what he told me not to divulge to family or non-family members, because he didn't want them to get harmed or be tangled up in the things that he had, So
yes.
I'm just putting that out there for people who may learn who it is. Just keep it in your ditty bag, tighten it up, and don't expose it just for the sake of trying to get some blue ribbons for your research. But I'm sure you'll be able to track down who I'm talking to. I just want to give a little backstory here. Simeon, you don't mind? Is I pronouncing your name correct? Simeon?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep, that's absolutely right.
All right. 65 years ago, but if we want to go back to 1943, I was born in January 1943 in Watsonville Hospital. But a month before that, by coincidence, the USS Finch was commissioned as a destroyer escort. So we both have almost the same birth date. We're only a month off, okay? And my first UFO sighting didn't begin with the Finch. I was back in 1958. I was living in Gilroy, California. I was in high school. I lived on Dunlap Avenue, and the only reason why I mention that is because that's when I looked up and saw this sphere. It looked like a ball bearing. and it was suspended there for like 3 hours. At first, I thought it was a blimp on end because that's what it would look like if you didn't see the cigar shape of the blimp. It looked like a ball bearing, and it stayed up there for the longest time. And the irony of it was that was in 1958. Well, in 1969, I came across a paperback book while I was still in the military station in San Diego, and the subject of the paperback book was on UFOs. And in the pages of this paperback was a description of the same UFO that was spotted by forest rangers at Mount Madonna, which is just like a mile and a half away from Gilroy, California, in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And 2 of them had witnessed the same UFO. So I had wondered for that for years, but it was an endorsement that I just wasn't hallucinating back there in 1958. And that was my very first UFO sighting. But before I didn't graduate, I'd gone into the Navy, and I also had opportunity to see spheres and things like that in the local hills of Gilroy, witnessed by other teenagers at the time. At Coyote Lake, we would go up there. That's where we would all park, and do our thing. And then, we would see these spheres just flashing by through the canyon of Coyote Creek. So those were pretty interesting days, but I didn't think much of it. I wasn't interested in UFOs and things like that. I had some issues as a teenager, and I had to go into the military. You've probably heard those stories. And so I really got a jump on correcting what was necessary for me to serve my country, and I am honored to have done it and survive. And I hope others will appreciate our men and women in our service who are giving up a great deal to do that. But let me carry on here. My career in the Navy was from 1960 to 1980. And I retired as an illustrator draftsman, E6. And I joined in San Diego, went to boot camp, and right after I went to Birmingham, Washington, and reported on board the USS Kuntz, that's COONTZ. That was a brand new destroyer guided missile that they had built in Birmingham, Washington. And I had remained on there for a year before being reassigned to the USS Finch, which was stationed in San Francisco at Treasure Island. They call it Bueno Island, but it was Treasure Island. And the year was January 5, 1961, when I reported aboard the USS. Yeah.
Where was Treasure? You said Bremerton, Washington, was where the.
Well, that's where I out of boot camp I went to Birmingham, Washington, and reported aboard the USS Kuntz DLG-9
as I went to Treasure Island.
And then I went to Treasure Island a year after San Francisco. Yeah, it's that little island from the Bay Bridge before it gets to Oakland. It's called Buena Island, but in those days they call it Treasure Island. I don't know if they still carry that same name. Yeah.
Got it.
And so I was stationed in San Francisco, and I was there on January 5th, 1961. Okay, I retired from the Navy in 1980 with an honorable discharge. The day after Mount Helen blew its top, I traveled from the East Coast, and it seems that I was always assigned as an illustrator, artist, draftsman with the Intel centers. I was aboard the USS Nimitz in my final years in the Navy, working in the Intel Center. Now, the Intel Center, believe it or not, is where all the secrets go as far as surface ships, airplanes, subs, et cetera, et cetera. So I got pretty close to some of the personnel that worked there. I would have to do the charts and the graphs for the briefings that the officers would all have to have, when they were going on to sea trials or whatever the ship's mission might be, whatever the Nimitz mission might be. I was probably among the only enlisted men besides the stewards who fed and serviced the officers that got close to what was really going on. So I had to have ear cotton in my ears and not spread scuttlebutt, which is rumors, what I might have heard. And there's a lot of stories I heard regarding the Bermuda Triangle and things like that. And, you know, at another date, we can talk about those things. But right now, let's stay focused on the Nimitz and what I witnessed on there. Now, you know, I mentioned that it was commissioned, and I've always had this itch about it being a month older than me. But I didn't realize that 17 years, 18 years later, that I would be aboard the Finch and serving on board and inboard the CIC station radar intel center aboard the Finch for approximately a month and a half. I just didn't have what it took to be a technical radar man, and I'll admit that. So they, you know, my career as a radar tech was very, very short, and I continued my journey until my God gift of being an artist landed me working for an admiral in San Diego eventually after my tour of several other ships after I left the Finch. But getting back to the Finch, she had an awesome career from a DE to a DER. And I don't want to go into that because the listeners, they can go to, you know, PDF file USS Finch and they can get all that technical information for themselves. And it's a beautiful history about that ship and the man and the officer it was named after. So on about September 1958, you know, I was assigned. The ship was assigned in Pearl Harbor, you know, Hawaii in 1958. And on 16 September 1958, she departed for duty on a 24-day picket station on what they call the barrier patrol. You know, that's kind of like patrolling the southern border wall between Mexico, and I'll just put that for a little short laugh, and the United States southern border. So the barrier patrol, and on the 20th, she entered dry dock, and then she departed the 22nd of December and assumed her duties on the Pacific Barrier. Now, during this period of time, we were on the Pacific Barrier. After 1958, when I was there, they continued to patrol that area off and on from our home port in Hawaii and San Diego between, you know, Buena Island and San Diego and Pearl Harbor. The ship would spend months out at sea. And it just so happened that, and I'm going to jump forward here for a moment, on the 26th of February 1962, the ship sailed from San Francisco en route to Pearl Harbor, and it arrived on the 5th of March. And the next 4 weeks, it was consumed, you know, with a brief, you know, underway periods of preparation and sea trials and all this and that. And then it was given a new assignment as a picket vessel in Operation Dominic. So that was when I was aboard at 26 February 1962. And in 1962, once in a while you'll hear me say 1961, but 1962 is the prime period of time when all the things that I witnessed took place during that period of time, which involved the testing of nuclear weapons during the Operation Dominic. Now, you slow me down if I'm going a little bit too fast here, but on the 3rd of April...
For the listeners, Operation Dominic, as you explained to me and as I did some research, was testing of nuclear warheads and material that would be later put in the Minuteman missiles and the Atlas missiles, right? They had to be tested first to make sure that they would do what they were expected to do.
Yes, that's correct. You can go to YouTube and you can look up Operation Dominic and you get all the material. What I want to do,
go ahead.
Yeah, what I want to do here is just specifically target the operations of the Finch in the time period that the UFO sighting took place, and what I, you know, as a non-technical person that may have been monitoring it long before I visually was, you know, assigned and ordered to observe it visually. They have more data on that, and you probably have to go to, you know, deep throat searching to get that information from ship logs if they want to reveal it. But from what I know is that the ship had two different logs, the intel log regarding UFOs, USOs, and whatever, and then they had their regular intel logs on their daily communications with known and unknown.
Two separate logs. I see. The really sensitive stuff went to another log. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, the Operation Dominic, was testing nuclear weapons, and on the 3rd of April, the Finch departed Pearl Harbor, and it bound for Christmas Island, approximately 1,200 miles south of Hawaii. Where the commanding officer, I won't give his name, he received additional briefings for the ship's assumed Station 9. That was the area we were to patrol, Station 9, in April of that year. Now, I just want to put another footnote here. Among the 258 ship cases reported to Blue Book in the Pacific and in the Atlantic, there was 37 cases that were not easily explained. And the author who put this transcript together about UFO sightings from commercial and military vessels, aircraft, surface and land, they found very interesting, because from 1961 to 1962, Blue Book reported in this chapter a spike and increase in UFO sightings occurred. 48 to 60 cases were reported, for these 2 years. And it just so happened I hit the mark in those 2 years from 61 to 62. And I am so happy, because I was able and I was ordered to witness a real UFO. And the nuclear test area of the Pacific, about 70 satellites were orbiting Earth during this period of time. Now, I don't know if that's true or false. I don't know about that, and I don't know if they really want to tell you the truth. We had 70 satellites up there at all. Okay? You'll have to go and do that research yourself. Now,
David, that was 70 American satellites, or 70 total for the whole
world? 70 orbiting Earth during that time period. I don't know if they were Russian, English, French.
Okay, a total of 70. Go ahead.
Yeah. And starting in November of '59, they started to get a big flap of UFOs, and the commercial airlines and ships and commercial vessels were all reporting UFO flap in starting on around November 8th, 1959. Okay, and I've got some deep throat witness reports here that you won't find on YouTube or the internet. And maybe I will provide that hard copy to you. And some of the stuff, I just want to say, Simeon, I'm going to send you a hard copy. I'm not going to use the internet, because there's too much. You know what I'm saying? Too much stuff being captured that I think you might want to keep very personal. Anyway, starting in '57, the Air Force began operating a small fleet of missile range instrumentation. Now, they might have had a preeminent idea that keeping up with the Russians, they're going to have to put different types of sensitive monitoring systems in the sea and out of the sea. And, in my notes, I'm going to tell you this, and I didn't do a footnote on it. I'm going to tell you this. Aboard the Finch, long before we had drones, long before we had electronic remote control cable connected umbilical cord sub devices, we had it aboard the Finch. The Finch had gone to dry dock and installed some very advanced technical devices that weren't even mentioned for 20 or 30 years. But I was able to get to know some of these professionals, let's just say technicians, who had gone to school to learn how to operate these devices. And at that particular time, the ocean floor, wherever we were assigned, were dropping these drones into the ocean so they can monitor what was going by. Okay, detect submarines, USOs, whatever was going on, the Finch was involved. So let me continue here. So anyway, these instrumentations to support the missile test range, okay, and it was called Operation Range Vessel, okay, and the code name was called Whiskey. In June of 25th, this small group, and I don't know how many it consisted of, but not very many, on June 25th, 1960, at 23:34. That's 11:34 p.m. at night, in the vicinity of the Ascension Islands in the South Pacific. They were retrieving from the ocean a data cassette from the missile test number 1802. Now, you'll have to go, to Wikipedia, wherever you want to find out what missile test that was, and it wasn't part of Operation Dominic. But anyway, the data cassette had a strobe light and was spotted by personnel on the sea surface ship and aircraft above. As a small recovery boat approached within 300 to 500 yards of this cassette, the crew observed a speedy bright glow appearing 100 yards from the direction of the cassette and about 25 degrees from their boat. The white yellowish object, and I want you to keep this in mind, what I'm describing here, because it's exactly what I used to witness at night coming along the Finch at night. Okay?
Yeah.
Anyway, yellowish object just below the sea surface appeared to rotate in a 360-degree circle. Now, rather than directional pattern, its glow was consistent with intensity, and it was witnessed by the RCA photographer who was on the pickup group, and test observers and diver members of the recovery crew. Okay, and I don't know how big this thing was that they had to pull back into the boat to get the data, but it had to be pretty big to have this little teeny armada to go out there and retrieve it. The pilot and co-pilot of two planes that were circling over the recovery operation also observed the USO's glow. Okay, and here's the irony of this: no waves appeared to break the sea surface over the USO. It was established that none of the planes released any flares over the recovery site at that time. Okay.
I see.
Now, my question, like everybody else, was it a USO? Or, sub-launched UFO? Who knows? But I do know this: the description of this report, which is in Blue Book, fits the exact description of what I used to see when I was standing watch on the fantail. That's the back end of the boat, the ship, and my duty was, to look aft and see and observe and report to the bridge and record whatever was not common at that time of the watch. And so anyway, I would see a lot of these things. Okay, now a Pickett Navy radar ship. Okay, a lot of them would see a lot of these different things, and a lot of the watch standards revealed to me aboard my ship, and later I learned from talking about other watch standards or personnel from other Pickett ships, that they wouldn't report. Okay, they wouldn't report the high number of sightings because they would get ridiculed, and it was just too embarrassing. And a lot of them were career, sailors, and they wanted to get to their 20 years, or they wanted to get promoted, or they wanted to get, so they wouldn't do it, and they wanted to get off the watch standing list and really pursue a career doing something else besides that. But
you're saying they'd be ridiculed by their superior officers, or?
Oh, the fellow shipmates and officers.
Okay, got it. Yep.
Yeah, I can recall, and this is not in our intended for this audio, but I used to stand watches at the helm of the ship, steering the ship, being guided by the ship's compass. And right next to me was a 10 radar scope, and I could see these blips that it was picking up. And the deck officer would come over, and he'd look at the blips, and he would discard it. He would say, "Oh, that's nothing. That's just a falling star. Or that's just a malfunction of the radar." And so even the officers didn't want to report everything they saw. Okay.
Got it.
So it's not it's not surprising, that the Pickett ships, didn't want to fill out all these reports. They were stationed out there. Most of the men were just looking forward to get home, after 90 days at sea, so they didn't want to make waves. They make waves.
Now,
don't make waves. I want to have some good liberty. Anyway, the distribution of type of Navy ships reporting UFOs, of all of them, which were destroyers, cargo transport ships, commercial, military, the carriers, destroyers, tank and dock landing craft, et cetera, radar picket ships above all the percentages was 34%. The lowest was 9% in other types of crafts, whether it was aircraft, surface craft, or subcraft. Okay? Destroyers came in second. But our picket ships, and there were many of us out there, but 34% of them reported UFOs or bogies. That could not be explained now. That could not be explained. Because if you know the system, you had submarines, you had trawlers that had communication systems far greater than the Finch, not necessarily radar systems, but communication systems. You had carriers out there, you had heavy cruisers out there, more sophisticated than the Finch in respect to standard electronic surveillance. But the picket ships got the most. And I have always wondered, why did the picket ships get the most? They were on the outer perimeter, you know. Why would they have them? Well, I learned later that our particular picket ship had some secret equipment. And I'm only speculating. I only speculate when I talk about it, okay? It's called scuttlebutt. It's rumors, you know. So don't hold a red flag, or, you know, because I'm giving away government secrets. It's all scuttlebutt, okay? Now, on September the 27th, 2010, and you might know about this, Robert Hastings, you know, he's an author, okay? He wrote a book, and he devoted 40 years of research, okay, interviewing military veterans. Well, he didn't interview me, and I didn't see anything in his book about the experience I had, in depth anyway. You know, but it leans toward nuclear test sites, missile sites, okay, where some of these UFO. We had hundreds of sites in the South Pacific, and it was not a big thing, okay? But when we get to the real meat of the story about the UFO that I witnessed, that eventually crashed, excuse me, and the Navy's attempt in the triple top secret attempt to recover it failed, I actually talked to the Master Chief, who was a second class back then, you know, who actually was the first diver to try to recover. He was sent down to identify what it was. He wasn't down there to see if it was a UFO or a USO. But anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, the testimony of more than 100 individuals in his book, I'm talking about Robert Hastings, the UFOs and nukes, points to the fact that we had one of the biggest contingency tests going on in the Pacific off Hawaii, at Christmas Island, Jarvis Island, Nuku'iva Island, all those islands down there, excuse me, that nobody was paying attention to because, you know, there was the first manned rocket, there was the Russian, you know, space traveler, there was all kinds of other things going on. So, between 61 and 62. But it's just among other superpower military weapons being tested out there. We had Russian crawler ships, you know, trying to spy on what we were doing, you know, with our nuclear tests, et cetera, okay? But it's always been my opinion, that capitalism, communism was being monitored by UFO extraterrestrial observers. I'll just come out and say it, okay? And intervened only when it appeared to them there was going to be a nuclear war between the two major superpowers. Did you get that? Yeah. So if I get that in now, I don't have any questions. Well, what do you think is going on? Yeah, excuse me, I take a drink of water.
David, are you saying that this, we've heard a lot of information stories about UFO activity around nuclear sites, and Hastings has talked about it, his books, his videos, and you're saying this is another area that hasn't been investigated very much, right?
That's right. Most of the guys like me are dying away. And I'm not talking because of old age. We were all exposed to nuclear fallout. We were exposed to radiation. We were exposed to radiation. And I got letters to prove that they're interested in knowing how long I live, hoping that I don't relieve some of this the stuff that I witnessed, hoping that the radiation was going to take me out before.
I see. Well, I guess we're going to get the story before the radiation gets you, so please continue.
Okay, so anyway, yeah, let's move right along because we got a long ways to go. I'm going to bend your ear on this one, Simeon.
Go ahead.
Eyes on the ball. You know, Eisenhower back in 1954. Now, bless his soul. We don't want to go into what he witnessed or who he talked to from, outer space. But in 1954, to build a spy plane, he gave the approval and discovered that didn't work, right? So in 1960, it marks the first successful Project Corona mission, was a reconnaissance program that he signed off and gave it to the CIA. Boy, do you not want to give CIA everything. But he gave it to them in April of 1958, the Corona authority to handle all of our spy satellite system and control what's going on. Well, he made a big mistake. Anyway, the UFO incident, the Cuban Missile Crisis, we had that going on, in 62. And I was part of that. We went to general quarters. We were preparing for, going to war with them. If we came close to a nuclear war at any one time in American history, I'll tell you what, it was back then. And being a young 18-year-old, I was full of piss and vinegar and ready to go, okay? Yeah. I had no idea what I was getting into, But that's the way it was. Now, UFO, believe it or not, during that period of time, violated the NORAD Region 21, which is an airspace moving, and it was moving faster than jet interceptors could catch up with it. And the NORAD command was ready to use tactical nuclear weapons to stop it. Now, a lot of people didn't hear about that.
What year is that, David?
This was in the region, let's see here. I've got it listed, 1962, on or about November.
To use
nuclear weapons to take it down.
But they couldn't catch it. They couldn't catch it.
No. This incident was just one of many, There were a lot of witnesses, including many officers with the entire air defense sector, on alert with the nuclear-armed F-106s, And that particular UFO was cruising straight and level at 73,600 feet and was pulling away from the F-106s at a full afterburner, moving faster than 2.3 Mach 2.3.
What region is that area? You said NORAD region something or other. What are we talking about on the planet?
I don't have that with me right now. I don't have that with me right now.
Go ahead.
I just have the date.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So and it seemed like the UFO had a sixth sense. The pilots would say as they tried to move in on it, and like it knew exactly what their tactical maneuvers were going to be at the altitude they were flying. And it took a radar lock on, but could never catch up with the UFO, and it reached 75,000 feet before the planes had to come back.
Right.
Before the burnout. Now, I located a list of names and directly of Navy personnel who participated in the South Pacific nuclear test from 61 to 62. Now, anybody that has a little brain can go to PDF and look up the USS Finch, or just go to Google and call Finch, and they can get the names of some of these people themselves if they want to call them up, if they're alive. And, they might get a kickback and say, that David, he's crazy. I don't know what kind of smoke that Indian is doing these days, but you know what I'm saying? So but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. 61, 62, the major world events, took place. We had the Bernie and Betty abduction. Remember them? Betty Hill in 1961.
Yeah, Barney and Betty Hill, right.
Yeah. That was the big one. Well, we had the first man in space. We had NASA Ranger 4 launches. We had United States Friendship 7 go up. The Berlin Wall went up. Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin he orbited the Earth, and U-2 pilot didn't quite orbit. He landed in Russia after being taken down. And there's a long list of things that was going on, but I don't see any of them as headliners as to what I witnessed. I don't understand
Yes.
that. Okay.
Yes.
The UFO sightings by astronauts. Now, who's going to get a closer look than me? Well, from 61 to 63, we had astronauts that actually seen stuff up there. We had Major Robert White. We had Major Gordon Cooper. We had the NASA pilot Joseph Walker. Now, you people can go do your own research on this. I've got mine. I'm going to keep mine, and if you're not going to read mine unless Simeon lets you. Okay. Scott Cooper, Franklin Carter, all these guys, 50s through the 60s. Okay, they seen the stuff. They seen real UFO.
I will say that Gordon Cooper was quite vocal about it, right? He talked about the Mercury orbiting missions and the things that he saw, and he was vocal until his death several years ago. So, yeah. Oh yeah,
and there's a lot of us old guys, giving deathbed last statements. I don't want to be in my deathbed and give this one up. I got other things I want to talk about. But this really happened, okay? Now, I had for years, Simeon wanted to give up the name of the ship I was on, and I kept hesitating because, I had a love child, and I didn't want the government to take away my pension, and there was all kinds of reasons why this stuff didn't happen, okay, that we're discussing today. So I had a lot of reasons not to unveil what I'm giving you today, but right now everything is going cool, and there's so many people talking about UFOs.
I know, David. We appreciate it. I really appreciate you coming on today, and this is great stuff. Great stuff.
Well, some of the paranoia I had was a phone tapping. I had one famous ufologist contact me, and he stopped talking to me because I wouldn't give up the name of the Master Chief Diver on Gitmo who revealed to me everything. So he stopped corresponding. We only had like 2 emails, and then he stopped. But that's okay, because I didn't want to give that name away. If he was a real journalist, he could find out on his own, right? Because I gave him a lot of footnotes on who it was, especially the year that I was there. I mean, there was only one Master Chief Diver the year I was there. Hello. Anyway. Mm-hmm. So, there was phone tapping between the time I left the USS Finch until 2011. My phones were being tapped. Okay. I had been approached by not just men in black, but men in white.
Men in white.
Yeah. And I would have interested ufologists talk to me on the phone, and they say, my phone has never been tapped before, but every time I call you, I know it's being tapped, so I'm not going to call you anymore. Okay. So anyway, I said, that's okay. I had gone to MUFON. I gave them a short tape. Nothing compared to what you're getting today. It's on record, and I can provide the number to the reference of that invite.
You mentioned that. You mentioned that before, yeah. David, one thing you mentioned that you had mentioned in our previous interview, which I haven't shared yet, is you referred to them a few minutes ago as technicians who came aboard the USS Finch to install special equipment. And you said that the other guys on the ship and you all felt that it was a type of specialized radar. It might have been a weapon system. Are you going to elaborate on that a little bit, or is this a good time to talk?
Well, that's up to you, because if I stay focused on what I witnessed, everything else that I would tell you regarding what other sailors told me from their second, third-hand encounters or observation, there's no meat on the bone. You know what I mean? But I, for one, you only got like 90 personnel total on the Finch. And everybody, everyone's a family member. And when you see civilians walking around with non-military clothes, and they're working that equipment in sonar And in CIA, CS, ICE, down to the Central Intelligence radar systems, and all about the ship, you kind of wonder what's going on. But it was so
I get it.
hush.
They weren't sharing anything with you guys. So basically,
but we didn't, especially me. I was just a gun, what they call a deck ape. I didn't have a need to know. I just had to clean urinals and paint the ship's deck. What the heck? Well, I didn't have a need to know.
You didn't have a need. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please continue with your.
And so I'm not arguing the point. I just want to get that straight.
Got it.
I will explain what I assume, presume, and from my personal perspective, from my station point, and what I believe and what I disbelieve. But I do know what I see.
What did you see that night? Yeah, I think this is what you want to. Our listeners are probably really wondering at this point. What did you actually see?
Oh my God! I got some other technical stuff to give you, but I'll
okay.
Jump to that, okay?
Go ahead. No, please do. Continue in any order that you feel.
I have to set the stage because you know what? I could give you a 5-minute dissertation of what I saw, and it's like, oh my God, you really got this guy? Anyway, I just want to give and share something that to me has stuck with me for over 50 years plus, and I want to make sure that you get the full course. Okay.
Of course. Go ahead.
And so to begin with, I want to share an odd coincidence like I did in the beginning about my birth date and the Finch, but there are a whole bunch of other things that I could go back to as a footnote. But I won't do it right now because I know people want to find out, what's going on. Einstein gave Einstein said something that made sense to me after all these years. In reality of the thermonuclear strategic war that he foreseen, it can be best described and summarized by him that its energy is sufficient to split the Earth. And I actually believe that the extraterrestrials realized that, that it was sufficient to split the Earth, whatever we were doing. And I want to give you an example right here in which the United States has never participated. And recently, in the recent news, the Soviets lit off another one of these nuclear tests. And the public today is not really getting a dose of how serious this is. Tsar Bomba, a Soviet nuclear test, detonated on October 30th, 1961. Get this, 1961, on their end of across the street from us, not in the South Pacific, but wherever they do this, they're testing. It was over what they call Mitsubishi Bay. It was a nuclear testing range, okay, and near the Arctic Circle, and it was over Novaya Zemlya, the archipelago. Well, anyway, the Arctic Sea. My enunciation doesn't sound very good.
Archipelago of the Arctic Sea.
Yeah.
In the Arctic. Got it. Yep.
Yeah. The most powerful nuclear weapon ever detonated. It was the most powerful artificial explosion in human history at that time. And the bomb had a yield of 50 megatons of TNT. In theory, it would have had a maximum of 100 megatons of TNT. Okay? If it had included uranium-238, which I think Hillary Clinton sold them. I had to put that footnote in there. It's my opinion this nuclear test by the Russians is what got the aliens' attention. Get that again? It's my opinion this nuclear test back then in 61, October 30th, is what got the aliens' attention. Okay? Now, Operation Dominic was a series of 36 nuclear test explosions with a 30.1 megaton total yield conducted in 1962, my period of the observation, that took down one of these UFOs. And I can give you a list of nuclear bombs that went off in the ionosphere, subsurface, surface, that was fired by land and fired by subs that could have taken this UFO down. But it happened during the daytime. So I had listed what between 12 o'clock noon and 6:30 p.m. what bombs went off, and sometimes two at a time, that I think actually caused this UFO to come down wherever it was concealed. Okay, So this yield of bomb that the Russians did, yield of bomb that the Russians did, I'll tell you what, it really got our Navy, it really got our government thinking, okay? And so we started to say, hey, heck with the nuclear agreements we made. We're going to go in to the Pacific and we're going to start testing our own bombs, okay? Mm-hmm. So the majority of the tests, which were 29 airdrops, okay, were weapons developed tests, okay, intended to advance design that the labs had been cooking up during the years of moratorium, the nuclear moratorium, okay. So it was still on the drawing table, and they just took it off the drawing table. We did because the Russians did, and so that's why we were doing this testing out there, okay. Now,
I believe, David, a lot of this, when we talked last time, I went to the internet, I think specifically to Wikipedia. It does have a list of specific tests by date associated with Operation Dominic, so listeners can look up, which particular... I'm going to give a very short list of the ones, not right now, but in a few that I personally believe, because what I witnessed was during daylight hours. It was not at night. So I got an excellent look at this UFO, me among others, that were debriefed, like by the Gestapo. We were not debriefed like, a cop taking your description down. Oh no.
We had to undress. We had to get naked because they wanted to make sure we didn't have cameras. Something in those days, a camera was not like a little a digital today, Yeah. So. And anyway, this deal with these tests going on, I've listed just a few that focus on the period of time that I witnessed, and you could throw a dart at either one of those and say this is the one that that revealed the UFO as witnessed by Dave. Okay. Mm-hmm. So anyway, here we go. On 26 July 1962, the ship sailed from San Francisco and to Pearl Harbor, arriving there on the 5th of March. The next 4 weeks were consumed with brief local underway period briefings and preparations for the ship's new assignment as a picket vessel in Operation Dominic, which involved testing nuclear weapons. On the 3rd of April, Finch departed for Pearl Harbor, bound for Christmas Island, approximately 1,200 miles off Hawaii, where the commanding officer received additional briefing, and then the ship assumed Station 9. On the 25th of April, all hands were buttoned up on the ship's interior as Finch maneuvered to safely position itself for witnessing the first nuclear detonation of Operation Dominic. The nuclear test series once again, on the 17th of May, the ship headed for her assigned test station. On the 20th of May, duties were assumed, and the following week, another nuclear detonation test was conducted. No sooner than the all clear was announced, the ship left station and set sail for Christmas Island, arriving on the 28th and the 30th of May. Now, you got to understand these dates and times I'm giving you. I'm standing watch. I'm standing watch at night. I'm on the bridge. I'm at the helm. I'm port and starboard on the flying bridge. I'm amidship. I'm on the fantail of the ship. That's looking aft. And I'm seeing USO lighting up in the ocean floors, subsurface. I'm seeing what people would just write off as falling stars turning right angles. Will you ever see a falling star turn right angles? I've never seen that until I seen and witnessed it at sea. Okay, so some of the tests were the Test Adobe, the Aztec, the Arkansas, the Yukon, the Tania, and the Nambi. Those are the Operation missile tests during the day, somewhere at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, somewhere at 4:30, some at 5 o'clock. The names I just gave you, if they slow the audio down, they can get it again. Test with Adobe, Aztec, Arkansas, the Yukon, the Tania, and then Nobi. Those were the ones. One of those is what I believe took down the UFO. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, I got the dates. Want the dates? I can give you the dates, but I'm sure you're going to find that out yourself. Just go to,
David, just one thing here. In our previous conversation, you suggested that it might have been these weaponized radar systems that were taking these craft down. But just to correct my own idea of that, you're saying
that was when we had our first interview. That was a speculation that I was given because of the secret radar and sonar system that was being brought aboard when we had gone into dry dock in Pearl Harbor before we put Tinder out to Christmas Island.
But now you think it was particular. You think it was a particular test explosion that did bring down the object that you saw pass by the ship?
It would be safe to say it was a combination of both.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I would be safe to the combination of both because you see, the United States had never done these ionosphere tests before. And the islanders like Hawaii and Pearl Harbor and Oahu and all, I mean, it knocked out their electricity. The EMF did some knocking out. And from the YouTube research and over here that I've been watching, it's been suggested, believe it or not, that Tesla and Einstein at one time, their papers were combined. Now, whether or not they sat down and played poker together, I don't know. I think the difference in age and timing was off. But when they collected Teslas after he died in that hotel, the CIA collected stuff. And then Einstein, who helped with the atomic bomb and all that stuff, they just put two and two together and came up with 22. Okay? And I believe that it was the radar system that the Finch had and some of the other picket ships had, the coordinates and the interception of the EMF frequency waves that they were putting out there. You could have fried hot dogs at 2,000 miles away with some of these things. And when the UFOs, to test, this is my view, when the terrestrials discovered that whatever communication or operating systems they had was getting some unreliable and unwanted reaction in the physics of their makeup, they kept their distance. And I think one of these that came out of the sea, actually came out of the sea, okay, and I'll get to that sometime. They came out of the sea, it was hit by the radar. And at the same time, with one of those bombs went off, okay? Because the monitoring systems that we were dumping in the ocean to monitor potential enemy subs was also picking up stuff that our sonar techs couldn't even identify. Okay, I'm putting that out there, and I could get in trouble for that. But anyway,
did they tell you that? How did they? Yeah. They told you.
Well, in a tight ship like that, you get to know everybody, from the guys that work in the bilges, from the guys that work in the gun mount,
of course.
People you get to know everybody, and you all eat together. You all use the same restrooms and showers.
The sonar operators had told you that they're seeing stuff there that they can't identify. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, these are high techs. They go to schools. When we go on Liberty, they go to school. That's the way it is. Okay. And with the advancement of technology and the possibility of going to war, everybody on both sides of the fence are grabbing for the best technology, spy cameras, spy satellites, you name it. Okay. And so the Finch was outfitted with some of when we were in dry dock, for example, they never used a shroud to cover the bow. Now, why would they cover the bow with a shroud? I was on the deck force. I was a painter. I was a deckhand. I couldn't go near the shroud, which covered a third of the ship from the bow to amidships. So they were installing, not from the top like they normally do, to cut a hole in the deck and they lower it into the whatever deck they want to take it. They cut it in the hull. They opened up the hull and put this stuff in there. Okay. So okay. So anyway, that's I don't know what was behind the shroud, but I can tell you, we went to some places and the ship took some roles that I didn't think I'd be living today for some of the stuff that we experienced as deckhands. But anyway, let me get back to this thing here.
You were just saying things are being loaded and unloaded on the ship, and you couldn't even see what it was because it was covered with a shroud when it was in dry dock.
You know, I'm not being sarcastic, but who are they going to call? They're going to call decades to put the rigs together, whether you're dry dock or not, underway, and they're going to do the hauling, they're going to do the cabling, they're going to do the transferring, they're going to do the packing and the shipping. You know, we weren't allowed to go near it. Okay?
I see. Okay. Yeah. That gives us a sense of what's involved. Please continue.
Yeah, it just seemed odd. You know, we had the muscle, but they had to bring their own muscle to install whatever they were installing.
I see. I see.
Yeah. Now you can allow. You know what, folks? You can allow your imagination to do whatever you want with it. I played around with this and that, and I've always gone back to what I know and what took place. Okay, what took place. Now there was a lot of activity after I left. Okay, immediately after I left. And some of the verbal phone calls I made with a few people that are no longer here, they passed on. They told me that some of the advanced missile systems that they were using had also caused a few of these strange bogies to crash into the ocean. And I don't know anything about that. I'm only referring to what I witnessed. Okay. But the Thor missile, which is a very powerful missile, was used to launch a lot of these nuclear weapons up there in the ionosphere. Okay, and that's like 30 to 248 miles in outer space, folks. Below. Okay, and then they would set these things off. So if you're out there and you're extraterrestrial and you just you're preoccupied looking in your little microscope on Earth, and one of these things go off, and you're not prepared. What do you think is going to happen? What's going to happen is what I witnessed that day. So here it is. This is my account. This is my account, at best I can recall, of what happened that fateful day. Okay? Mind you, I'm just a seaman deckhand doing what deck apes do. Chip paint and swab decks, most of the time in port and underway. On the subject day of the UFO sighting, minutes before all hell broke loose, the man your battle station's alarm was sounded throughout the ship. We dropped our swabs and manned our battle stations, not knowing if it was a drill or the real thing. A command directive came over the ship's mic. Ship's master at arms, report to the ship's captain, the captain's cabin on the bridge. Followed by the 1st Division lieutenant, he selected enlisted men to man the starboard side railing. I was one of those several who were selected to man the midship starboard side railing. I'm guessing, but I think it was in the early or late afternoon when the ship's all hands man your battle stations. This is not a drill went off. There was no time to think. Listener, let me tell you, you are drilled day and night when you're out at sea. You don't kick back looking at magazines. They didn't have iPhones. They had one TV for 50 men each, and so you do drills to keep yourself busy. So underway sea trials and exercise drills for hours at sea made battle-hardened seamen and quick responders out of every sailor and officer aboard the Finch. Prepared and at the ready within minutes. Once on my battle station dress location, I was ordered to report to the starboard side of the first deck. Okay. The men to man the rails at attention, eyes forward, in silence. There were about a dozen or less shipmates enlisted, and I think an officer in attendance at that same location. I don't remember the ship's heading or the time, exact time, nautical time, why we were called to attention at that location. Only the sea spray and the wind striking us as the ships plowed through the choppy waves head on. The order came from the ship's bridge, and I don't know if it was the skipper or the exec officer at the time, or just the ship's yeoman, to stand fast and gaze on the horizon straight forward, 90 degrees from the bow of the starboard side. and remained silent unless spoken to by officer in charge. I mean, there was dead silence. The rumble of the waves crashing head on and the rumble along its starboard hull tested our stiff balance as the ships cut through the waves upon waves on course. What seemed to be an hour, the order came from the bitch box. That's that speaker overhead. Mm-hmm. Ship's command speaker. The order came for all hands on the starboard side to look 90 degrees, shift eyes forward 90 degrees off the starboard side and observe in silence, tracking visually what you observe in every detail. I focused as hard as I could. I can remember I wanted to be the best one. You know, I wanted to get the blue ribbon, but I had no idea what I was going to look at. Okay, I had no damn idea what I was going to see. Okay, in dead silence, the surrounding side of the ship and the sea vanished. The huge object approaching the Finch off the starboard bow was not of this world. And people, let me tell you, I get a crackle in my throat because I can see it. I went into brain freeze. I can only recall that the moment in time as I watched this immense, unidentifiable object move downrange in the opposite direction of the Finch. And it was like the fuselage, 2 football fields in length without props, jet engines, or wings, slowly moving down. It was so immense. I thought at the time, why doesn't it fall? Why doesn't it go into the ocean? At the first, I first caught the sight of the object. It did not resemble any logical airborne aircraft that I could recognize or been taught to recognize as a lookout. I had been trained to recognize as a watchstander surface ships, no military or commercial aircraft in skywatch experience. Silence was broken by a whisper. I could hear someone comment, "What the FU is that?" The officer in charge of the group, he broke ranks and ordered us to report to the ship's galley for further instruction before the strange object slipped downrange toward the horizon. I caught a short, slight glimpse of the UFO as it slipped out of sight downrange, vanishing at the point of the horizon. We were ordered to the ship's galley by twos, and we sat at the ship's galley tables by twos, and ordered to sit and remain until ordered to the ship's personnel office, which was down below the O1 deck. I was still trying to make some sense of what I witnessed on deck moments before. No one had a good answer before ordered to remain silent until our names were called to report to the personnel office. The debriefing. Confused, then it was my turn to describe what I had seen and witnessed, the strange object. And I don't think a stenographer could keep up because the agitation and the gargle and the confusion in our thoughts and words just didn't make sense. We had nothing to relate it to. And so I just came out and said, the strange object approached at a very slow speed. I mean, for its size and shape, for a short time I watched, maybe a minute to a minute and a half. I wondered how could this huge cigar-shaped stay up so high off the sea, above the sea. That was my first thought. I could tell it was whitish in color without markings. It was a cylinder with a smooth round front nose, like a gigantic cigar tube. You know, the aluminum cigar tubes? It looked like that. That's what it looked like to me. Only long, about 1.5 to 2 football fields in length. And I'm just using that as a gauge because I used to watch football. It was long, okay? And it was like 10 to 15 degrees above the horizon, above the floor of the sea, the sea surface. That's how I gave my description.
Well, David, what was the speed again as it came by?
I would say it probably traveled about very slow. It was going like maybe 200, 300 miles an hour.
And two
It
football
wasn't going really. The ship's heading was going, I think, maybe 14 knots.
You're right.
Okay.
So
it's probably going a lot slower because it's going in the opposite direction. It makes it look like it's going faster. You know
I understand. I understand. And just to give people a sense of the size, 2 football fields in length, right?
Yeah.
Approximately. Yeah. Big. It's a big object.
Oh, it was huge. It was huge. I mean, and I didn't follow flying saucers or cigar-shaped UFOs at that time. I was 18 years old. I was 18 years old. I just wanted to do my job, make some money, go on the beach, and get drunk. Like sailors did.
Yeah.
And so it was something we couldn't even talk about. We couldn't even mention it. You could talk about the lady you shared a beer with on your last Liberty port, but you couldn't talk about this. You know what I'm saying?
Why couldn't you talk it?
Nobody could relate to what it was.
Nobody could relate to it. Yeah.
There was no dialogue. There was no way. No way you could even. What did you see? Well, I saw this thing in the sky. What was it? I don't know.
Did you see it? Did you see it submerge under the water, or did you just see it go off to the horizon behind the ship?
Well, the story continues, but when I observed it for a split second, it headed downrange and disappeared toward the horizon, meaning it could have been at the same elevation, but miles away, it appeared to just meet the horizon. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's where the true story of this object is revealed to me, okay, years later, okay? But let me finish this because this is important.
Go ahead,
when it came to a full view and it hit it, I got a good look at it when it was perpendicular right to my visual sight, okay? And the day was clear, okay? It glided without losing altitude. You didn't hear a sound. It didn't make a sound. Okay, even with the waves crashing, you could hear the seagulls, flying parallel with the ship. You could hear them drop a splat on the ocean, but you couldn't hear this thing go off. What was keeping it up? I don't know. Okay, it was silent, and as it passed the ship's bow, to stern, I caught a view of a very faint blue glow exiting the rear of the cigar shape. It was kind of blue, but it wasn't like a jet flame. It was just like an aura. You know what I mean? Like a donut aura, okay, in the air. It wasn't coming from the ship. This thing just seemed to have a glow, a halo, okay? It wasn't a rocket type. It wasn't a rocket type exhaust. No smoke.
No, understood.
Yeah, it had kind of a pulsating glow to it. Okay, not moving up or down as it made its way past the Finch. Okay, just in a straight horizontal line, heading down range until it disappeared into the horizon. I thought I saw some smoke, but I think I was just imagining it because the logic didn't seem there. So I was trying to fill in the blanks with my imagination of the strange tube object. But I think my mind was trying to justify something there, okay? So to make up some rational reason for what this large thing was, I couldn't figure it out. Whatever this flying machine was, it was just too odd. For a slight second, I thought, or I imagined a ring, markings on the side of the object, and I can't testify to that, even though I witnessed this thing. If there was any graphics or there was any symbols or anything like that, okay? It was too vague to recall. I just remember seeing the cigar-shaped object look like an aluminum object going down range. And whatever it was, it defied natural law of physics, solid and heavy, at the max, as it shuttled past the Finch. In silence. I think the only thing making noise was our stomachs because we were hungry. But that was it, man. It was just crazy. Okay.
So you were interrogated about this object, is that right?
Yeah, we had to go to the debriefing. we had to go down to, when our names was called, and I don't even remember who my partner was. We had to go down there in twos. And the first thing that this officer in civilian, well, I guess I call him an officer, but he was a civilian, in civilian clothes. He read us the Riot Act. That's a phrase used for, this is a command, this is a contract, this is a disclosure. And if you violate it, you're going to spend 25 years in prison. And every cent the government paid from boot camp to this day, you'll have to pay back if you don't keep your mouth shut. Now take off your clothes. Every stitch of clothing has to come off. You take the clothing, you fold it up into a bundle, and you pass it through the door. And there was somebody on the other side of the door. I took the bundle of clothes. I'm standing there with everything hanging out, and their clothes. We received our clothes in about 45 seconds, a minute later. We put them on, and we had to sign a paper. I remember the paper was little. It wasn't a big 8x11 sheet. It looked like a half a sheet. And I signed my name. I didn't bother to read it. And he slipped it away in the folder, and that was it. That was the debriefing after I described what I did, what I explained to them. Now, somewhere in the archives, deep in the government, underground, is my signature on a piece of paper.
I get it.
Yeah. So after that, mums was the word. It was never brought up, never talked about. But you know what? Strange shit started to happen. Excuse my French. A lot of strange things started to happen. I had a lot of paranormal events happen on the Finch after that experience. Before I left the Finch, and maybe you might want me to mention a few at the end of this. But I mean, it was really weird stuff, weird dreams. Okay. But for 14 years would pass before, answers to what took place back in 1962 during the Operation Dominic. It would come to light at Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Okay, 14 years I was assigned there. Okay, now it's really weird how I met. I knew the chief was part of the dry dock or ships repair department, but our paths never crossed because he was like on the other side of the dry dock. His crew, he was in charge of a small group of men, divers, who would, not salvage divers at that point. They would go and check the hulls of ships that would come into Guantanamo to see if they needed cleaning or needed to go into dry dock or whatever.
David, can I just stop you?
Yeah.
David, can I just stop you for a second? Is there any noise on the line, or is my voice clear?
Yeah, your voice is very clear.
There's no noise.
I think maybe mine's getting kind of hoarse because I've been talking for so long.
Okay, continue. So the story gets more interesting because you tell us that years later at Guantanamo Bay, you never got any information about this object. You signed something saying you wouldn't talk about it, and years later, how does the story continue from here?
Well, it's really strange how I knew of the chief. I had seen him at quarters in the morning. You call it quarters, where different departments line up and they have kind of a quick inspection, check your hair, check your shoes, and the different departments you're set out on the compound, so you really don't know people in the other departments, but you see them. And the master chief, he's got nearly 30 years in the military. He's big and browly, smokes a cigar when he's not holding inspection. He's a typical chief, master chief. And anyway, I don't know if I want to get into any detail of how I exactly met him, but we would spend a lot of time drinking at the enlisted men's club and at the chief's club. We just wouldn't go to the officers' club because you weren't allowed to patronize with the officers. But the chiefs and the enlisted, whether you were a Marine or a sailor, and this is before Gitmo became, a prison for, terrorists. So it was kind of like an open area, except for the minefield that bordered Gitmo to keep the Cubans and those who wanted to go AWOL, to protect our borders at Gitmo. but we would drink a lot, we'd party a lot, and it was at one of these parties. It was at one of these parties that I happened upon where the chief was drinking, and in a rowdy bar, you know, a bunch of military people. There's like 100 guys to one female military person. We got nothing better to do but to party. And I saw a small group at the end of the bar, a group of men sitting around and yelling and screaming, you know, cheering on. And so I moseyed on over to what was going on. I hadn't even had a drink in my hand. And then it became very quiet. And as I got up to the table, the Master Chief, what was happening is he slammed his head on the table. And I thought, God, this guy's really drunk. You know, is this what 30 years does to you? You know, because I knew that there was a celebration because he was retiring in a couple of weeks, and I thought this might be one of his farewell beer busts for all the enlisted guys who knew him. But what he did, he had a popular trend that if you put 3/4 on the top of a table and he slammed his head so hard on the table that it would flip the coins, you would have to buy him drinks all night. So that's what the bet was, and that's what the cheering was when I arrived at that particular scene. And I seen him flip the coins, and he didn't pass out, and he had been drinking all afternoon. So after he had a few drinks and everybody was fanning out, everybody was going to their own group, you know, a bunch of guys going to their own cliques, you know. The chief was sitting there by himself and everything, and I wanted to get to know him, you know, because he was a shipmate, and I hadn't quite reached his level of intoxication. So we just started rambling, and he was rambling more than me. And these little get-togethers, you know, it's scuttlebutt. It's all scuttlebutt. It's like, you know, and I don't want to talk about Navy talk, but anyway, he was a hardcore diver, and he had some sea stories, and he wanted to give his sea story. And so I just nonchalantly says, 30 years, Chief, what are you going to do when you get out? You know, what the heck are you going to do? He says, I'm going to write my book. In a slurry, drunken state, he said, I'm going to write my book. And I said, what book? He said, I'm going to write a book of what I saw and what I engaged in, you know, 14 years ago. And I said, what was that? He says, you don't want to hear about it. And I said, yeah, come on, Chief. And, you know, all of a sudden the noise and the rowdiness and all the crap going around the table became, in my mind, silent, because I had to get close to hear him mumble what he was saying. He says, I'm going to write my great American novel on a bogey or a UFO that we attempted to salvage in the South Pacific around the end of Operation Dominic. And I said, what? What? Am I hearing right? Am I hearing right? Okay. Mm-hmm. And I said, hey, Chief, I said, you don't know me, but we're in the same division. I said, if I come into your office one day this week before you retire and I mention this conversation, will you remember me? And he looked up at me. He says, I'm not that drunk. Okay. So that was the end of the conversation. And, you know, I put it in the back of my mind. And then one day, it was just a week or so before he was going to retire, the flyer or poster was going around that he is going to have a barbecue at his home for you know, a farewell barbecue for anybody that wanted to go in attendance, you know, and you know, housing, military housing, everybody shared the same cockroach, you know, dwellings. Didn't make any difference if you're an officer or enlisted. They were all matchboxes, you know, ready to go up in flames. And they'd been there since World War II. So it was a big event, you know. I mean, something to do on Guantanamo. You know, you're not going to the bar, you're going to somebody's house to drink, right? So I moseyed on over there by myself, and he was not inebriated, but he had already turned a few steaks and hot dogs, and he was sitting down. And when I approached him, you know, I was the only one that he got my attention. He says, hey, he says, aren't you so-and-so working at SRD at the engraver shop? And I said, yeah, that's me. He said, you thought I forgot you, huh? He says, come with me. So he got up slowly, and then we went into his bedroom, and it was really packed with boxes and shit he was putting together, And he had one box that hadn't been sealed yet, for the movers to come and pick up. Somewhere in between this conversation, I had asked, well, how many days you got left, and I don't recall what he said. But he opened the box, and it was filled to the top with binders and loose leaf papers and all kinds of stuff, And he said, this is the material I was talking about at the club that I'm going to put my story together. And I said, hey, Chief, can you just give me kind of the short version? Real short. I want to get the drink. That was in my mind. I didn't say it, but that's what I wanted, So he began to tell me the story about when he was a second-class diver in Pearl Harbor back in 1962. And his group was called away on a top-secret mission 200 miles south of Pearl Harbor, or I don't know if he said that exactly, but he said in the vicinity where an air vessel had gone down. He said air vessel had gone down. And his troop didn't have a need to know until they got underway, meaning out of Pearl Harbor and a few nautical miles out, before they would get the exact location. He didn't say how many were in this group, but he said it was a full complement of divers, chiefs, enlisted men, etc., him included. And he was a hard hat diver. Hard hat? That's when they had that Bible headgear with heavy canvas you have to slip into, with cables and stuff. I mean, they had advanced diving equipment, but he's what you call a gopher in second class. You get to go first, okay? So I mean, he's ready, he's eager, he's young, he can do it, right? So they get out on station. They're not told what to look for. They gear him up, okay? They gear him up. He still doesn't know what to look for. He's just given instructions. He get taps on the head, and they told him, okay, when you get overboard and you hit bottom, we just want you to observe, okay? And we're going to tell you where to look. We're going to tell you, because sonar had already picked up this object, I guess, and they already had the coordinates or whatever it was. So he goes over the side, and he doesn't tell me how many fathoms it is or whatever, but he describes when he hits the bottom of the sea floor. He's looking around, and they give him some lamps, and I don't know what kind of power lamp, candle lights they give him, but anyway, he's flashing it around, and he doesn't realize it. He told me that his back is to whatever he's looking for, and doesn't realize it. Okay, he doesn't realize his back is to the object he's supposed to be searching for. So he does this 360 ocean slow turn, and what he faces, he almost loses it. He can't believe the size of this thing. And he thought that when he hit the bottom, that the light of the ocean, because it was a clear day, you could see for depths. I mean, in the Pacific, believe me, where there's no pollution during that period of time, you could see pretty far. Okay? Yeah. But he thought he had gone down in a canyon or something, in a crevasse, and what he was looking at was the edge of this crevasse that was blocking out the sun shimmering from the surface. But as he got closer, he realized that this was not natural coral. This was not the side of a cliff down below, okay, or a ravine. And I can't give you the right description, but this is how I received his conversation. And when he got close to it, he reported aboard, with whatever communication system they had, that he wanted to come up, that for whatever reason, he did not want to be down there. And they gave him instructions to get close to it, to touch it, kick it, whatever you got to do, and come up and report to us. Yeah. Report to us what it is. And so he said that he put his hand out. He put his hand out to touch it, and his hand went inside of it. And as soon as his hand went inside of it, he thought that it was going to suck him in. It didn't pull him in, but he got really, really nervous. Okay? And this is something they teach you and they train you because of sharks, seals, porpoises, curiosity mammals. They teach you how to control yourself because you're going to see live things down there, hammerheads, whatever. But he lost it. I mean, he was really scared. And as soon as his hand went in, he was telling me it was kind of like Jello, but at the same time, it felt like a giant jellyfish. And when his hand went in, as he was pulling his whole arm from the elbow in out, the thing lit up. I mean, he said this gigantic, whatever it was, lit up and started to pulsate with light. It lit up the whole sea bottom. It lit up the whole sea bottom. And he skirmished his arm out of there, and he panicked. He went into panic mode. So they hauled him up, and he doesn't talk about, he has to, what do they call it, pause halfway going up and everything so he doesn't get that sickness, motion, whatever they call it.
The bend, the bend.
When you deep dive, the bends and stuff. But he got up there, and when they removed his brass helmet and everything, he had puked all over himself. I mean, it was really bad. And so they didn't take him out. They did not take him out of the suit. They said, you got to go down one more time.
You're going down again. Okay.
Yeah. He said, you got to go down again, and he says, over my dead body. So all of this is taking hours. I'm not talking about the 5 minutes I'm describing it to you. The chief is telling me this took hours. The boat they're on is rocking, and there's you have to take care of the equipment, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. And there's picket ships or other ships circling the perimeter of this, salvage boat. And so anyway, he actually said he had to be airlifted. He had to be airlifted. They had one of those old-fashioned seaplanes, Navy seaplanes that came down and picked his ass up and took him to Pearl Harbor and put him in the hospital. He stayed there long enough for some of his shipmates to come and visit him. And what they told him is secondhand. And by the time it reached me, it's fourth and fifth hand, I guess. But what they told him, and they were bound like I was under penalty of prison and forfeiture of your salaries, that if they revealed anything that happened after he was evac to Pearl Harbor Hospital, military hospital, that they were in deep, deep trouble. But they whispered to him that after they had taken him off, the following day they were still on station. They had set buoys on this thing, that they had marked it. They had set down sonar monitoring devices. There were submarines off station taking soundings. There were ships taking soundings. He said the flotilla out there was unimaginable. And he said when they had 5 or 6 divers go in to inspect this, and they came up, they had finally measured this thing, and he said it was huge. It was if not longer than an aircraft carrier. Okay, and he said it was cylindrical. And that's all he was able to get out, or he was informed. And he says, and he wanted to know, well, what were they trying to do? They were trying to figure out. They were bringing professionals how to bring this thing up, or how to cut it in two, or how to salvage it. But before they could actually remove it, he had to kind of imagine or make up a story based on just the fragmented pieces he was able to pull together from his shipmates, okay? That most of them were being shipped out. Most of his shipmates who made the initial discovery when she was part of, they were all getting transferred to different locations throughout the United States and abroad. And so what he was able to piece together, he told me, was this thing at night, and he didn't give a time, but under the cover of darkness in a clear night, this thing glowed with effervescence to a point where the whole ocean lit up like a neon light bulb or a tube, and it rose above the surface slowly and slow enough to allow the surrounding ships to pull away without falling, being disturbed in a way that they would capsize. And we're talking about escort destroyers and destroyers and other ships in the vicinity that was monitoring this thing with all kinds of devices. And he said it moved so fast under the sea surface without causing great waves. And it went out of sight. It went out of sonar reach. They could not locate it. They couldn't find it.
Wow.
And that's
amazing.
That's what he was given. Okay. Now, anybody out there listening, that they can have their own, make their own imagination. But I'll tell you something. Some years later, they made a movie about. It was called The Orb, and I think that, remember that movie, The Orb? I forget who starred in it. I think it's taken from that incident. I think somehow something leaked out, and that movie, The Orb, was created with a big change in the script. But
David, did you say that did the Master Chief go down a second time or not? He wouldn't go down again?
No, he didn't. They demanded, they said, you're going to lose your second class rank. You don't follow orders. But he went into a psychological, physical relapse.
Yeah,
he went into relapse. Yeah, he went into relapse. He said at one time some people from high up in the government interviewed him while he was still in the hospital, and they wanted to know what happened when he put his hand inside the hull of this thing, or whatever it was. So he had to give them, the best he could, the same description I gave you to them. I don't know, it's probably more detailed.
Did you mention before that he saw movement inside?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I left that out. He saw shadows.
Moving shadows.
Yeah, what appeared to be humanoid type figures, but no detail. Yeah, no detail.
No. That was exactly what you said. That was exactly what you said a year ago. Humanoid shadow, no details. And he sort of had a nervous breakdown about it, didn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why he went to the hospital.
He had a nervous breakdown. From my point of view, listening to the chief, if I was in his shoes, I would fake it. I wouldn't want to go back out there. I would not want an assignment like that again. Okay? And, there's all kinds of things people do for their Navy career.
David, is it possible that some of these other divers that went down, you said there might have been 5 or 6 other divers, would they still be alive?
I have no idea. I've made no attempt to see if there are anybody talking about it. But I'll tell you what, this thing, if the CIA is in charge, believe me, you're not going to get iota out of anybody, because they don't pay you off, they take you out. Okay, and if you're career minded, or you're an innocent, naive sailor like I was on the Finch, and you have a family. My God, I was already married. At 18. And what's the worst thing I would want happen to me or my wife if this thing came out? There's no way that she could survive without my paycheck, which wasn't very much. So there's a lot of things not included in my story that controlled my behavior and my thinking to reveal what I know today.
Yeah, you're revealing it now, and without saying anything specific that you don't want to. Did you ever have contact with the Master Chief again after that time at his house, or do you prefer not to comment?
Well, I have to comment because it's part of the entire story.
Okay, go ahead.
True story. Okay, and And so for many years, I've really contemplated what the heck really happened on Gitmo. Okay, what really happened? And the chief had about a week. He had about a week before full retirement, and a few days, maybe less than a week, maybe 5 or 6 days before he was due to retire, he got electrocuted in the bathroom and died.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
He died by electrocution. And here's the other kicker. He had a personal yeoman. You know what a yeoman is? A yeoman is somebody who's like your secretary. When you get to be that high in rank in those days, you have your own yeoman. Okay?
I see.
And he had revealed to his yeoman, according to the chief, what the chief had told me, that the yeoman was typing up a transcript based on all the loose leaf papers and binders and sketches that he had made to make some sense of it, so that when he got out and retired, he could at least do an outline of his story. Okay? Mm-hmm. So if anybody knew as much as he did about the story, it was this yeoman, right?
Yeah.
And get this. The yeoman was housed in the same barracks I was, but he was always quiet. He was always a person. He was kind of what you call a nerd today. Mm-hmm. And the last time I saw him, we were both taking a shower at the same time, and I wanted to discuss the Master Chief's book before he left in a couple of days. But the kid, he wanted to go. He had one of the very first skateboards that came out, and believe it or not, he died also a couple of days before the chief died. He got in an accident going up a hill on Gitmo with his skateboard.
They both.
I have always. Yeah, he died too. I always found that kind of strange,
They both.
Anybody? I'm sorry.
Yeah. They both died within a few days of each other at Gitmo.
Yeah. Now, anybody, if you can get in there, if a person wants to do the research, they'll know exactly who I'm talking about. It won't take a record of science, get the what do you call it, the paper, the government paper for revealing,
Do you find it suspicious that they both died?
I do. How many, with all due respect, Simeon, I've been carrying this around for how many years? 57 years. Mm. And all the dots are being dotted, all the T's are being crossed. You know what I'm saying? And
it's such an important story, David. I mean, this is a part of American history, American military history, naval history, right? It's such an important. It's one of the most important stories I've ever heard about this subject, because so many people are involved.
Well, I didn't give you any of the detail. I'm only giving you about 60%. Mm-hmm. Quite honestly, I want to save the most of 40% when I do the illustrations and do everything that other things.
I'm looking forward to seeing this.
I really appreciate and respect you. I've gone over your dossier online and stuff. I got to respect you, because a lot of the paranormal events that I experienced is right down your line. After that, I had, it was really weird. I had a call last week from a gentleman who's 80 years old, and I don't know him from hell or Shinola, and he was asking me questions that were kind of out of the box that nobody else would know but me, regarding my paranormal experiences. Mm-hmm. But he was asking me in a roundabout way without revealing why he wanted to know if I had these experiences. Okay? Yeah. So that is strange. That is strange. And I had an experience here. I'm just going to incorporate this before I continue. Since I moved over here, I have never, ever, Simeon, never, ever in my life seen shadow people. Okay? And I don't know if it's got anything to do with the delusion of old people or not. I don't know. I'm laughing at that because it might be true. But I saw 2 shadow people, and I know what I saw. Okay? And my son, I have a love child who's 13. He didn't see them, but he knows if I seen it, he believes I've seen it. That's just the way it is. Anyway, I'll get back to my story. Yeah, the death of the yeoman, death of the Master Chief, just surprised. And over the years, I thought about it. So I did some research, okay? I did some research on this. How many people in the military have died in the bathroom getting shot? And believe it or not, in Europe, at an Army military base, there's been a couple of deaths recorded where housing inspectors failed to recognize that a shower curtain with metal hooks was being used on a painted conduit that was not authorized, that had live wires going through it in the old Cape Heart housing. Now, hear my word, the old Cape Heart housing. In those days, they either had Quonset huts or they had houses that were made of Vermica, or they, you know what I'm saying? During World War II, and they just prefabbed them. And so the chief, he died in the bathroom, coming out of the shower, grabbing a hold of one of those shower. But you know what? I take a shower every day or every other day, and I don't grab the shower hooks. I just grab the plastic or cloth shower curtain and move it aside. Why would I want to handle some? When the chief weighed over 200 pounds, do you think he'd want to balance himself on a conduit? I don't think so.
You're saying that you were told he touched the hook on the rod, on the shower rod. Is that right? That the rod had been electrified or something?
Well, you know, if you got wire hooks that are conductors
on
to electricity, and in those days they didn't have PVC where you rub the hook back and forth. They just had paint. You'd get to the metal conduit, and if you got a loose wire in that conduit sending electricity that isn't insulated, well, I can see how you're going to die. Or
I can see that. I have never grabbed shower hooks in my entire life. To get out
I never
shower.
have either.
And I'm not 200 pounds, and I've still never done it. So that. Listen, David, this is such a good story, but we're getting to the end of the recording period that I had set it for. And I'm wondering if you want to continue in a week to talk more about the aftermath of this and any.
Oh yeah, you got to hear about the men in black and white. You got to.
How about? I have an idea. Why don't we do another interview in a week to continue? Because we just covered about 2 hours, and that's a lot even for anyone to listen to in one video. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I want.
Well, maybe one day you'll help me write that novel. My grammar sucks.
I'd be glad to. Would you like? How about in a week? Would you like to continue talking around the same time? I'll just contact you by email a couple days before next Wednesday or something like that. Next Thursday.
That'll work. Yeah, around the same time would work. My boy is still in school.
Because I want to hear the rest of what you have to say about this, but I'm going to have to. The recorder I've set for this is going to turn off shortly. So, is that a deal? We'll continue on in a week. The consequences of this and anything else you want to share about it?
Just the fact that after I left Guantanamo Bay, I left with more questions than I had answers. And so I put feelers out there. I actually deliberately tried to get maybe some first responders who had witnessed the same thing I did, et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't get any nibbles, and maybe I didn't hit the right note. You know, I just got like 2 emails recently within the last month of someone who disbelieved what short conversation you and I had, and it got out there. You know, you read it, and then this other fellow that I'm really suspicious about, why he's trying to get a hold of me, asking me about circumstances that maybe he's experiencing or had experienced. You know what I'm saying?
There's a lot of interesting characters in this in this subject matter who will come out of the woodwork. It's quite an interesting phenomena, and you don't know where they're coming from, and I don't blame you for being a little careful who you want to talk to. But this has been really interesting, David. I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy it. Yeah, it's so much just to think about as it is. I mean, I'm really kind of in a state of shock. It's so
well.
But thank you, David. I want to say thank you very much. I'm sure our listeners are going to really enjoy this, and we will pick up a week from now and back in the telephone opportunity. Okay. Okay, David, thanks again, and we will talk to you very soon again, okay?
All right. Bye-bye.